Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 116. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. As always, with me is my co-host, Zach Roberts. Zach!
How you doing?
Good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm alive. It's about all I can ask for these days.
Indeed. That's a net positive. Anything new in your life?
Nothing big. Working on a photo book, realizing how over my head I am on it, and also at the same time trying to write some grant proposals. So I got to write about probably 30,000 words in the next week. So that's going to work out well.
Nice, exciting stuff. Good luck with that. You'll have to talk about it on the shows. Tell us about your experience. Well, let's start the show. We got a lot of great guests on tonight. You can tell this is going to be a little bit bigger than your average show. But let's start with our brand new guest. He's never been on the show before, Mr. Greg Locke. Greg, please tell us about yourself.
Oh, hi. I am based in St. John's, Newfoundland, in the east coast of Canada right now. I spent 20 years as a news photographer. In the last 10, it's mostly in commercial, corporate advertising world. And I have never had a staff job in over 30 years.
Wow. Okay, well, great. Glad to have you here. Of course, you're one half of the Canadian team of visual journalists we're having on tonight to talk all about Canadian visual journalism. Let's introduce the other Canadian visual journalist, the man I'm going to butcher his last name, Alex Tetreault.
Almost, Tetreault. That's good. Hey, hi.
Hey, buddy. For those of us who weren't here for the episode you were on a few weeks ago, why don't you just tell us about yourself real quick?
Yeah, so I'm a freelance photographer based in Ottawa. I mostly work for a small publication, online national affairs thing called National Observer. My beat is politicians on Parliament Hill, mostly. Environmental issues, First Nations affairs. Much less experience than the others around here, but still.
All right, well, you have the experience that counts, which is Canadian experience, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. It's going to be our first topic.
Hey.
That was like a little bit of Happy Days and a little bit of Canadian. I'm going to see Canadian Happy Days. Let's make that happen. Anyways,
long past.
And finally, the man who needs no introduction.
I guess that's me.
I just want to see what would happen if I said no introduction. It's Mark E. Johnson, owner of visualjournalism.info. Tell us about yourself, Mr. Johnson.
I guess I'm the token American tonight.
Well, there's three of us
amongst the guests there.
But yeah, I guess sure.
Well, and here's the dirty little secret. I'm actually 1/4 Canadian. My grandfather was born in Nova Scotia. So,
Yay!
I've spent a good chunk of time thinking about whether it's time for the family to go back. By day, I'm on the faculty at the University of Georgia's Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication, where I run the visual journalism program down here. I'm the landlord for the National Press Photographers Association. NPPA is headquartered down here now as well, and starting in 2019, we will be running the Best of Photojournalism competition out at the University of Georgia. So that's the next big thing that's going to end up on my plate, because my dean and I have gone crazy over the last couple of years.
Nice.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
You're also our token white person, so that's good. Well, I can't even say white person with glasses, unfortunately. With brown hair. Oh, darn it. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Anyways, we don't know what race Greg is, so there we go. He's a black screen. He has no camera on him tonight. Anyways,
yeah, sadly.
But let's move beyond that uncomfortableness and talk about a somber thing. Before we get into the news, I want to take a moment to identify something a little bit more, I would say, somber tonight. So some of you might know from my history, I used to work with the 106 Rescue Wing, which is an Air National Guard unit out of Long Island, New York, out of West Hampton Beach, New York. And unfortunately, some of the members of that unit were unfortunately killed in a helicopter crash in western Iraq. So I just want to take a moment to recognize those who were killed, all of them. There were 7 that were killed, 4 of which were from the 106, which that's a big group, in terms of like one in specific crash. I think that's a large group, unfortunately, and I think it's a lot from the 106. So I can't imagine what they're going through right now. I didn't know these folks personally. I heard, I think, 1 or 2 names, but for the most part, I didn't have any personal connection with these folks. But I thought again, it was a tragic accident. We lost a lot of great troops. So I'm just going to mention their names really quick. Captain Mark Weber from Colorado Springs, Colorado. He was with the 38th Rescue Squadron. With the 106 Rescue Wing was Captain Andreas O'Keefe from Center Moriches, New York. Captain Christopher Zantis, 37, of Long Island City, New York, also assigned with the 106th. Master Sergeant Christopher Raguso, 39, of Commack, New York. I do know that name, but I can't place the face of the name, unfortunately. Staff Sergeant Deshaun Briggs, 30, of Port Jefferson Station, New York, also with the 106th. Master Sergeant William Posh, 36, of the from Atlantic, Florida. He was at the 308th Rescue Squadron. Staff Sergeant Carl Ennis, 31, of Tallahassee, Florida, with the 308th Rescue Squadron. And that's it. So again, kind of somber moment. Tough for the folks who are out there. I hope they're getting through it, and obviously not easy, and always sad when we lose our service members, especially in I think horrible circumstance like this. So wishing them all the best during this time. But again, had to start somber, but let's go ahead and start with the show, and let's lighten things up a little bit, and let's talk about Canadian visual journalism. That's why we have two Canadian visual journalists on tonight. So let's just start with what do you guys think is the biggest difference between American visual journalism and Canadian visual journalism? Like, what's the one thing you would say from your experience working on both sides, or what you've seen from both sides, that you would say is kind of the biggest difference? I open it up to either Greg or Alex.
I'd say scale.
What's that?
Scale, both budget and size of coverage and people to cover.
Are you saying the amount of people you have to cover and how many people you have to use to cover them?
Oh no, like for everything else, like back in the Army, it was size and money. So I'm just kind of saying the same thing here. It's just size and also money. We have probably more ground of empty ground, but it's a lot less people, probably a lot less budget all over. The situation is probably dire in both countries, but I don't know if it's even worse here or not. But I don't have the answer. It's a question.
Did you guys see the same parallel with sort of the introduction of digital and the decline of newspapers? I mean, did that happen in Canada similar to how it happened in America?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I try to think about scale is anything in Canada is about 1/10 of what it is in the United States. We have the 10th the number of newspapers, 10th the number of photographers, 10th the number of budget, 10th the number of population. So that's the kind of scales you're looking at. I think in Canada, we just over the past few years we've been looking at a huge number. Like every year, it's more newspapers shut down, more newspapers shut down. But because there's so few, we're now left with small cities that don't have any newspaper, local newspaper. Wow. And I think in the United States, I think there's a much better history or tradition of small town newspapers. From what I gather, and through the people I know that came out of Missouri and people who came up through the ranks in the U.S., I think in the United States there's that tradition of starting out at the small city, moving to the big city, then moving to the news magazines. And in Canada, that just doesn't really happen. It's very rare that a news photographer will come out of a small town on the prairies and end up at a major city daily in Canada. That hadn't been my experience at all. And I worked in Toronto with a couple of big dailies there on my way, part of my career. And I just think the States has a much deeper, richer tradition of photojournalism than Canada does.
Is there a reason for that? I mean, obviously, besides is there just a lack of that jobs because it's a smaller population, or is it just because of the way our government has sort of been laid out? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think we have a much more of a federal government, and in the States, I think because where there's so much more power within the state and at the county level, I think there's more news happening there. But it's also in Canada, we've only had, even in its heyday, we only had 3 or 4 major news organizations in the country, national news organizations, where, I think in the U.S. there's strong national news organizations, there's strong statewide news organizations. You've had UPI and AP as wire services. And in Canada, it's been 3 major companies that basically owned everything almost right from the beginning. So while, everyone goes on about the industry contracting, I think in Canada it's always been contracted for the past, 40, 50 years.
Right. What are those 3 major companies?
In the beginning, it was Southam News, which was a family-owned business that owned all the major newspapers across. They had cities, major papers in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Hamilton, Ottawa, the nation's capital, and in Montreal at one point. And then they sold out to a company called Can West. That got bought up by Hollinger, which you guys, I think, had a lot of properties in the U.S. And now we're down to, I'm out of it now, so I don't really know a lot of it, but I think we're down to 2 major newspaper groups now in the country.
There's Torch Star, that owns the Toronto Star, and Post Media, which is the legacy of what you just listed. Those are the 2 main ones. I think out east, though, you still got Irving. That still owns a lot. That's even worse in a sense.
Yeah, and there's another company actually that just kind of picked up the pieces of the major Halifax paper that was on strike over the year, and they just bought up the Newfoundland papers and a couple of more in Atlantic Canada from Quebec Port and Transcontinental. So,
is that what they call the Saltwire now?
Yeah, Saltwire. Yeah. That's the company. Yeah.
Excellent.
So let me ask you guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
How big is Canadian press up there? Here in the United States, the Associated Press is probably one of the largest news organizations spread out across the country. Is CP still fairly substantial?
I know, Alex, what's it like in Ottawa?
Yeah.
I know we haven't had a CP reporter. We've never had a CP photographer in St. John's, and this is a provincial capital and a big oil industry here, and I don't even think we have a CP reporter here anymore.
Wow, okay. Yeah, no, here in Ottawa, it's central, so we have all of them, I guess. Maybe that's all that's left. It's all Ottawa and Toronto, that's it. But a lot of the stories that still go around is still CP. CP is still the main wire of the whole country anyways. In terms of wire service, it's still up there and the biggest thing. So they're in all papers, both French and Anglophone papers as well. So
I think they have 1 staff photographer in Halifax. He's been there forever.
Okay.
They have 1 in Vancouver, and I guess they have 1 in Ottawa and a couple in Toronto where their head office is, I guess. But probably less than a half a dozen photographers now, where once upon a time they would have 3 or 4 in Toronto, a couple in Vancouver, and certainly 1 in every capital city.
We have 2 here in Ottawa, actually, and 2.5, I'd say, because one of the stringers is with them all the time anyway. So I guess this is where they have all their resources.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like the level and quality of visual journalism in Canada is equivalent or better or worse? How would you rate, what you guys, produce as far as what you can tell compared to the American side? Do you find, again, that they're, I wouldn't say as good or bad. I don't necessarily want to give it a quality modifier, but, would you say that there's the same level of freedom with regard to what you document there? You don't feel any sort of restrictions in terms of how you document. Obviously, we're both living in democracies and whatnot, but I'm just curious, is there sort of more, I would say, unsaid rules with regard to what you can and can't shoot, or what you feel you can and can't shoot? Or do you just kind of shoot whatever you want?
I was going to say, I just say sorry after and we're good. But, I think
it's for forgiveness, not permission.
The Canadian way.
But you ask for forgiveness for everything, right? That's the joke.
Sorry.
There was a great skit on SNL that it was the Canadian sexual assault, Me Too movement. Look it up on YouTube.
I shall. Back to the question, I guess. No, I mean, the only thing for me on my side of things that I have to be careful about is I do a lot of First Nation stuff, and there's some rituals that they just don't want to be photographed or anything, and you don't always know what it is until you break the rule, you get told, and you say you're sorry for real. But like those are the, I guess, social intricacies you got to be careful about. But most of everything else is fine. In Parliament, we do have some very specific kind of press gallery rules around Parliament. Like we have like specific areas where we're allowed to shoot, but they don't allow us to go into the office areas and around, like actual members of Parliament and whatnot. So there's that kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm assuming you mean like broader in the sense like of liberty of press type thing. I've not had any issues so far. You always get your usual cop who's like, "Oh, you can't take pictures of me." Like, no, yeah, I can. You're in a public space, obviously. So, but I've not had an issue with it. Maybe Greg's got more experience, so maybe it's been a different story for him.
I still do some shooting for Reuters, but it's seldom hard news. It's more feature stuff. But I worked on the streets in Toronto and Ottawa for a number of years, and I'd never really had a problem then. I think in Canada now I think there's so few photographers that they're used wisely. You get your assignment and you go do it. There's not a whole lot of flexibility in that old school enterprise shooting. It's I think that's probably gone by the wayside. But generally, for photographers, it's been pretty well open door for me. Like Alex said, a few times dealing with First Nations. There's a different structure that you have to be aware of. But other than that, it's very free and open, I think, in Canada. I don't know about the States. I've had a lot more when I have worked in the States. On stuff, I find people on the street are much more comfortable walking up to you and telling what they think of you, and kind of interfering in your job. I've noticed that in the States. I mean, the classic one is you ask someone a question and you go, well, I don't know anything about that, but I'll tell you what I think. Nice. Whereas in Canada, you're just kind of left alone to do your job, and unless you're really in somebody's face, no one's going to give you too much grief.
Right.
Like from what I've been reading in the news anyways, it feels like it's pretty much similar in terms of like law interference, arresting photojournalists doing their job at protests and whatnot. So there's quite a few cases in the States, and we also get our cases. We had like big protests in Montreal where you always get a journalist or two get arrested as well. Right now there's in Newfoundland, Greg, you're probably I can't remember the guy's name, but he's still in court right now. He was covering some protest. I don't know where exactly.
Oh yeah, that was in Labrador. Yeah.
Yeah. The guy's still under arrest or something like that, and that's not been settled. So
yeah, it's still before the court. So a young journalist out of Newfoundland was working for a small online publication here, and in Labrador, which is the northern part of our province, they're building a massive hydroelectric dam, and of course it's all over native land. It's a boondoggle. It's it's costing a fortune. It's a total farce, and so people are protesting it. And there were court orders for the protesters to stay away from the gates of this construction site, which is in the middle of nowhere. So at one point, a bunch of the protesters stormed. The gates were open. They didn't really storm the gates, but they just walked in, and he walked in with them. Everyone was arrested, and in the end, all the native protesters were let go, but they would not drop the charges against this journalist. And he's... did get a good job out of it. He's now like a regional reporter for APTN, which is the Aboriginal News television network across Canada. So, but yeah, it's obvious when you drop the charges against 30 people and don't drop it against one, that the government's making a point, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys about equipment. Obviously y'all use the same equipment we do.
More expensive.
More expensive. Do you ever go to the United States to buy your equipment and come back to New York, or I'm sorry, to Canada?
Greg, go.
Me, there's a guy in Toronto. It's called can't even think the name of the company, but he deals mostly with pros, so he buys and sells all the equipment for the big newspapers and wire services a lot. So I use him because the prices are really good. But if I'm really stuck and looking for something special, KEH out of Atlanta is my favorite website, right?
Maybe I'll ask you who the guy is in Toronto.
His name is Jeff Chevrier. And the company is right on the tip of my tongue. Photocreative.com. Nice guy. Yeah.
Oh, I've heard about that. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. He's right next door to Nikon if you're a Nikon user.
No, sorry.
He deals with other brands too.
Yeah, okay.
Greg, I'll support you on KEH. I've been dealing with them for 25 years or more, and I'm not saying that because I'm the local guy to KEH.
Yeah.
But 25 years of buying used equipment from them, and I've never had a single problem with them. Their customer service is excellent.
Yeah.
For folks in the States, they're one of the best repair facilities as well. Their turnaround time is really quick. Their pricing is much better than going back to the manufacturers often.
Yeah, nice. I find them a joy, and especially doing the cross-border thing. It's often sometimes it adds a little extra complication, but it's it's just brilliant. I just order it and it shows up, and it's cleared customs and everything, and it's always good gear.
I try to stay local as much as possible, but sometimes the price difference is so ridiculous. Like we're talking like $300 on a $1,500 lens or whatever. It's really ridiculous. I just recently I was looking at some Godox lights, and it's after taxes, after shipping, after duties, it's still $250 difference on a $700 device. So in those cases, I can't justify going local. It's just too expensive. But ideally, I'll try to get the local shops around here, like Henry's or even Bistec sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we don't even have a pro shop east of Montreal here, so it's nothing. It doesn't matter to me. I'm ordering it in no matter where it's coming from. So.
Wow, you got no Henry's or anything in
Henry's was here for a while, and they were great, but they just closed up this year. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well then.
So you order the equipment over in the United States, and then you go pick it up in the United States, or I understand how that works.
Oh, FedEx, UPS.
Shipped cross border.
Yep.
It's just shipped across, so you don't have to pay the taxes or the duties, or
Oh, you still do, but the cost
is
still cheaper. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And how's the customer service at KBH compared to Adorama or B&H?
I use B&H in New York sometimes. Between them and KEH, it's brilliant. It's most of it's all online. If there's a problem, you pick up the phone or you hit the chat button on the site, and it's like, yep, we can take care of that. I can ship it tomorrow, or I can ship it next week, or it's back ordered, and it's the response is quite astonishing actually in this day and age when I expect so little.
It's actually kind of sad. Like it freaks me out just a bit, in the sense that so much of my money is going down in the States when we're simultaneously complaining about how our market is also so small and everything. And it's just, but as an up and coming photographer who's a stringer starting up, I'm lucky because, as I said before on the show, my wife is amazing and works for the government and a sugar mama. Good, I'm set. But I've got friends who are just, they've been going at it for a few years, and it's still kind of a struggle. And so, as much as they want to support local as well, it doesn't make any sense for them to do it if the price is just not there.
Right.
In the end, it's just business. It's what it comes down to. A really good friend of mine here who has a similar career trajectory as mine, and he's just moved here from the UK. We talk, and we're so opposite. He's Mac, I'm PC. He's Canon, I'm Nikon. He's Lexar. It's really uncanny how opposite we are. But I say to him, it comes down to business. He goes, "Why don't you use Macs?" And I go, "Well, I can get something that's twice as powerful, half the price, that'll last twice as long, and it's just a simple business decision. I'm not going to spend $4,000 on something that I can get for $2,000 and have for 10 years."
Yeah.
Maybe you guys can find the D850 in Canada.
Oh, we have them here. Yeah, a friend of mine here has one. Yeah, so
it's just more expensive.
It's just more expensive. Yeah.
Indeed. All right. Well, is there any other differences? How often have you guys visited America? Do you visit America often? Have you visited once in your life? Where have you been in America?
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say Jacksonville, Texas, States. Where else? Vegas, Vermont, upstate New York. Like some U.S. military facilities for training here and there. But I haven't, honestly, I haven't been in a long time, and it might be still another 2 years and a half to 6 years and a half until I make it back.
Yeah. When I did news, like when I was working for AFP and Reuters, I used to travel a lot because that's just the way the wire services are. You go where there's stuff happening or they need. And what always happened was the Canadian guys got to go because you were always the extra. If they needed an extra guy, it's like just haul them out of Canada because there's nothing going on there that week, And but I've hit pretty well. I've hit all the liberal states. I've hit all of New England as far as Washington and Minnesota and Oregon, Washington, and California. But on the corporate side now, because I did a lot of work with the oil industry, I've done a lot of stuff in Texas and in San Ramon with Chevron and down in the Gulf of Mexico. So I get to see that side of it also now.
Any favorite places in America you'd like to come back to or work in, or if you were to abandon the Canadian side, you'd probably pick?
Hawaii.
Yeah, Northern California for me, or not too far away in Maine, I don't want to leave the snow, but, I think I'd be happy in Northern California, probably. That would be about it.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely Maui for me.
Do you guys have to know French?
Well,
Not everywhere.
Not everywhere now.
No. It's mostly a Quebec, Eastern Ontario thing.
Yeah, a bit down into New Brunswick also, but after that it fades out. I spent a lot of time in Montreal, Quebec the past couple of years because my daughter is a rock climber, national rock climber. So I travel with her a lot. She's a teenager, so it's great to actually spend some time in Quebec and Montreal and get to use French again because we don't use it much out here.
Nice. Mark, Zach, you guys got any questions about Canada you want answered? Deep down inside?
Are you accepting refugees?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
I've heard your healthcare system is terrible, according to people down here, but I'm going to deal with it.
It's awful here. We have healthcare and cheap houses.
I'm only like an hour away from you guys, so.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously. Just do it, man.
I'd like to go back a little bit. When we were talking about coverage out in the streets and things like that, you say that Canadian laws are similar to the United States when it comes to our First Amendment and rights to privacy, or are they more of a European model where in the United States there's no expectation of privacy when you're in a public place? In some European countries there is an expectation of privacy even when you are in a public place, like France, for instance. That if you want to photograph somebody on the streets of France, you have to ask for permission before you can do it. In the United States, that's not the situation. Which way would you say Canadian laws and the courts sort of lean?
It's 50-50. We have the wonderful province of Quebec, which means that we have two judicial systems. We have the English common law in the English part, and we have French civil law in Quebec. And French civil law follows more, the procedures of France, and English civil law is more, as a direct descendant of English common law. So we have both.
Yeah,
that must make it entertaining.
Yeah.
It's special. I mean, most of the time, it's generally if you're in a public space, that still holds. Like it's not necessarily open game, but at the same time, we also are still Canadian in a way, and we do I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but when I do shoot in public spaces, if I have mostly for kids, I take extra care for kids. If a kid is going to be in my shot and he's identifiable, I will then go and seek parental permission so to make sure that this can be published. I don't need a model release or anything, but I will get verbal agreement with the parents. Like, hey, listen, this is probably going to get published or not. I don't know yet, but so there's that. But I don't know about Toronto. I just know here I tend to kind of respect it. If somebody's going to approach me and say, listen, in a protest or whatever, I'd rather you not publish just my photo. I'm like, yeah, cool, not a problem. I'll try to the best of my capabilities to not publish it if I don't need to. But if it's kind of like that one shot of whatever Trump shaking the hand of Trudeau, and there's this one guy in there, and like, no, like, sorry, you're going in anyways. But it's a balance, I think.
Well, I would say, what would you say is the equivalent of the New York Times in Canada?
Oh, that's a good one.
Toronto Star, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, they probably aren't hiring a photo editor like the New York Times is.
There's a
Which
lead.
takes us to our next story. The New York Times is hiring a photo editor. A photo director, I should say, to be exact.
It's a couple
this
levels
is amazing.
up. Photo editor.
A job within the photo community is available. That's amazing. It's so rare, especially the New York Times. So this is again a big time job opening. If you think you are able and have the following, then you should apply. Let's see here. Daily leadership of a large staff of photo editors and photographers across the globe, covering all subjects. You should be able to maintain high journalistic standards and sustain a level of excellence that makes photography a core component of the Times. Sophisticated news judgment, strong grasp of feature and portrait photography, sharp eye for talent, and ability to recruit diverse first-rate photo editors and photographers. Strong photo editors, Zach, photo editors. Strong management skills, sophisticated sense of design, deep understanding of collaborative nature of work, and you should also know how to maintain high productive relationships with other visual units, video, graphics, design, etc. So if that sounds like it's something for you, you should probably apply for this job. Zach, you know what? I was reading that, and it all applies to you, buddy. So are you going to apply for this job?
Probably not. Considering I don't have a single day of newspaper experience, and usually, well, it seems to matter a lot. But yeah, no, I think I'm stuck being a freelancer probably for the rest of my life. So I probably won't bother to apply for this one.
Well, you know what they say. You lose all the fights you don't win, or you don't play, or whatever. You lose all the games you don't play. So,
that's true.
I would still apply. You never know, man. You might have.
I mean, this would be an amazing job. Other than the fact that I do wonder, forget what episode it was, but we were talking about photo editor jobs and about how almost all of the people we're talking to actually haven't picked up a camera like professionally in quite a long time. And I go, I don't know how long I could do that. I mean, I suppose you could do your own personal projects if you actually had time, which I wouldn't really imagine that you'd have that much free time in a job like this, which would be awesome. But that would kill me not being able to actually do any work, especially when you work for the New York Times and your work could be published there. But I don't know.
I think it's important to understand that the role of a photo editor is. And this is one of the issues that I ran into, and it's actually one of the reasons that I moved from shooting to becoming a director and an editor. Yeah. The skill set that it takes to be a truly great director is completely different than the skill set it takes to work in the streets, and it's a different mindset, it's a different approach. And the best photo editors that I worked for at the Associated Press and with some of my clients when I was independent had not worked as photographers, and they knew that. And they trusted the photographers in the field to tell them what was going on, but they understood the organization, the management, the backgrounding, the research, all of the things that those of us who are sort of on the streets and reacting to things on a daily basis. Great photographers, as my observation is, great photographers tend to make terrible photo editors because they want to be back out on the street and they constantly think, well, I could have done better and I would have gotten a different angle and this would have been a little sharper. And they don't know how to do the research, and they don't know how to do the organization, and they don't know how to do the budgeting, and they don't know how to do the recruiting, and they don't know how to do the negotiations, and all of those things that, as a general rule of thumb, those of us, even on the independent side, never had to do at a really, really high level. Yeah. It was a shocking experience for me when I moved from being a news photographer to being a director, and all of a sudden there was all of these things that I was asked to do that I had never really thought about. I mean, I was on my third day on the job as director of photography for a national sports magazine. As director of photography for a national sports magazine, and the business manager came in and said, I need your capital and operational budgets by the end of the week. Like, okay, we're a startup, so I don't have anything to base this off of. And she said, just make up some numbers and see what happens. And I was like, okay.
That's the foundation of every great newspaper.
Well, this was an organization that 3 years later got bought by ESPN for a lot of money after I left.
Yeah.
So apparently we got the budgeting right because ESPN wanted the property at the end. But again, that skill set is completely different.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's two different skill sets. You show me a photo editor who used to be a photographer, and I'll show you a frustrated person.
The majority of photo editors who used to be photographers tended to take the position because there was a pay bump and there were better hours.
Exactly.
And they didn't really want to be that coach and encourage and do the management side of it. And I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges that we have in the journalism world is that the majority of our photo editors and directors want to be good photo editors and good directors, but there isn't the training, at least here in the States, and I suspect in Canada, to really develop the skill set that it takes to be a great director or a great photo editor.
Yeah, I think of all the photo editors I've gone through, and the best ones were never photographers, but they came out of the news business. They had an inherent a news sense. They knew how to manage. They knew how to. It was almost like directors. They knew how to get the best out of their photographers. They knew how to abuse them. They knew how to compliment them. They knew how to pit them against each other. And it wasn't a photographer's job. It was a different job.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's the same in a lot of places where you start off like as an analyst somewhere, or even in the army as a grunt or whatever. And then the moment you move up a bit, you don't need to be a good analyst anymore. You don't need to be good at anything that you've learned prior to what you're at now. You need to be a people person now. You need to be a teacher. You need to be. The management is not the same thing. So just to echo what's been said already, the question I'd be having though, like as kind of a newcomer to the field, I'm kind of pining for a good photo editor right now, to kind of help me and teach me the ways. Shouldn't a photo editor, even like if they come from the news business, have some photo background just to kind of understand the basics of it? If I want somebody to teach me to be a better photographer as a photo editor, shouldn't that person also have a photo background? Or is that?
Yeah, I don't think so. The ones I've seen either come straight out of the news side or come from another. They could be art directors or something like that.
Okay.
There's not a lot of great photo editors. I always said even in 30 years, there's only 3 people in the world, photo editors, that I would, when the phone rang at 6 a.m, they say, I want you somewhere else in the world, like by tonight, that I would actually put my credit card down for, and there were some great ones. I mean, Bob Carroll is legendary in Canada, and he's retired now. He was the head of UPI for years. Marika Lupin, who was a photo editor at Maclean's magazine for years, was fantastic. Peter Bragg. But, that whole generation has either retired or they've been, downsized as the industry compressed. So it's, but it depends, they're still out there, but, finding them is never going to be easy, There's a couple of great art directors that are still around that I work with. They've moved from agency to agency in Toronto, but it's great. I'm still in their contact list, so we still work together. And when it works, it's really good, because they kind of point you in the right direction and give you the pep talk and send you off and give you a good brief of what they want. They give good direction is what it is, because in their mind they know what the image is supposed to look like. And, and I've had photo editors. I remember my first night on the job at the Toronto Sun. UPI had closed. Some of the people had gone to Reuters. I went to the Toronto Sun, and I walked in there that night, and there was a photo editor screaming at a senior photographer there who was almost in tears. And then he throws the film on the floor, and he looks at me. He said, "You better have something good, Locke." And I, with a shaking hand, I hand over my 2 rolls of film and just wait, to have my head ripped off. But I guess I had something good because I stayed for 7 years. So.
I think to add to that, I understand the desire to have a photo editor who can act as a coach. the photo editor's responsibility, there's this balancing act as a manager that you go through between sort of serving three masters. The first master is your staff and wanting to make sure that they have the resources and that they're going to grow. And making sure that you are producing images that are advancing the mission and filling all the needs that they have. The third master is the audience. It's whoever it is that's looking at those images. So for me, a great director or a great photo editor is actually should be thinking more about that audience and should be taking that audience's perspective every time they sit down and they look at the images with you. As a photographer, you're looking at it as when a photographer becomes a photo editor, they're looking at the images through the eyes of a photographer. If a photo editor comes up out of the news side or doesn't have a super strong photo background, they're going to be looking at those images more from the perspective of somebody who wasn't there. And that's the big difference between news photography and snapshot photography. You know, everybody's got a camera with them now, and they're always making pictures. And as an educator, I wrestle with this all the time because the students come into my introductory class and they say, "Well, I've been making pictures since I was 4 years old, and I got my first phone." Like, yeah, but you've been making pictures for yourself. They're snapshots. They rely on the people in the photograph remembering the moment to be able to tell the story. You're now going to be making news photographs where the person looking at the image that needs to understand the story wasn't there, has no background, has no sense of time, sense of place. They don't know what came before. They don't know what the atmosphere was like. A good photo editor is going to come to your take with that same perspective of the audience, of actually not knowing what's going on and seeing how they figure out what's going on through those images. A good photo editor is going to take that approach, but can also talk to the photographer and say, so this is what I'm seeing in your take. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm understanding. These are the questions that are being raised in my mind. Which of these images are the ones that are going to answer those for our audience and help move them forward? Does that make sense?
It does. I come to this podcast to learn now. This guy should be here every time.
That's what we try to do on the show. Give you something to learn about.
But it was like super wise, super on point.
I teach this every day down here at the University of Georgia. You know, I'll send you an application if you want to come on down.
No. We got free tuition here, so no, thanks. We're good.
See, if you move to Georgia and live here for a couple of years, you can get free tuition here too. So.
Really? What?
Free tuition, free medical care. Oh, you poor bastards!
No,
in
definitely
Georgia?
not free medical care. So, we actually have a lottery-funded scholarship for our state universities, so that any high school student who graduates with a B average or higher, any university in the state that they get into, any state university or state college, they get about a 70% reduction in tuition. If they graduate with a 3.7 GPA or higher, it's tuition free. So it's just room and board and fees. And we fee you to death. You guys get value-added taxes. We get fees. Our legislature says, we haven't raised taxes in years. It's like, yeah, but my car's gone from $10 a year to $90 a year to register.
Yep. So Zach isn't going to apply for this job. What about you guys? Anybody else going to apply for this job?
I'm too old.
I'm too new.
I'm too borrowed. I'm too blue.
Yeah. It's one of those, a job came up for a photographer, Reuters. I saw it on the Reuters feed in West Africa, and my heart jumped, and I go, "Oh right, I'm almost 60." But yeah, no, I'm doing okay.
55, Greg.
So they say, yeah. And but you look at it and go, you guys will find this out, but you forget how old you are when you get older. But you go, "Oh, that's cool," and I go, "No, I'm going to retire soon." But,
I would have loved that one. Yeah, I'm still wanting to go back out there since I quit the military, so it's just like, hey.
Yeah.
All right. Let's close it up with our last story this week. We're talking about a case of intimidation and bullying against a photographer. So specifically, there's a photographer named Toshiyasu Toshimorita who was contacted by a Michael James from the co-founder of AfroComicCon, which bills itself as the premier Comic-Con event for people of color and African diaspora in the California Bay Area. Anyways, Michael wanted some of Toshi's pictures and asked for them in sort of a forceful nature, and basically felt that because this photographer had shot photos at his event, that he was now entitled to the ownership of this person's work. And I just thought, when I read this story, this angered me. and irritated me, and made me feel like, why are there still people who think this way in this world today? Team group, what do you guys think of this story? Is this how mad does this make you that this happened? And what do we have to do to fix it?
Oh God, I don't know if you can fix it. I have friends in the retail business, and they say every day dealing with the public is a lesson the United Nations will need to learn.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with amateurs on all sides here. You're dealing with amateur actors, amateur organizers, and to some degree even amateur photographers. And they think they're the big time, and they're not.
This is a continued problem with especially newer Comic-Cons. I remember this discussion being a lot more back before Comic-Cons were like a real professional business. I mean, like people start a Comic-Con to actually make money. It's not about fandom as much anymore. This is like a huge business starting these shows, and there's just a lot of money to be made if you do it right. But if you have these smaller operators who have either done events before and things like that, they don't really understand how to deal with even semi-professional photographers. Definitely not professional photographers. I remember even the early days of, and I don't know if it was the early days, but like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, shooting New York Comic-Con. And the event organizers and the security and everything like that just had literally no idea on how to deal with professional photographers and the access that we needed or expected and things like that. Like I almost got into a fight with one security guard who wasn't letting me into the area that I needed to shoot when, even though there was no restrictions on access and I'd already been told that I was able to go there. But I've never dealt with this, but I've heard like, this in particular, I've heard more than enough stories about smaller cons either grabbing people's photos from, back in the day, Flickr and things like that, and just using them. I actually had the problem personally. Now that I remember, actually, it wasn't a Comic-Con, but it was a smaller convention called Wicked Fair. Luckily, that was just we just kind of agreed on dealing with it offline, not like this. The other problem is like when you don't know. I don't think that this photographer also necessarily knew ahead of time what his rights were and what his weren't. So there was also kind of a problem immediately off the bat there. But yeah.
Well, the organizers certainly came off on the wrong foot. Oh
my God. Yeah. No, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you want something for free, then, there's nicer ways to ask. Yeah.
Exactly. Don't send a cease and desist and whatever.
Yeah.
Any comic book conventions in Canada? You guys ever shoot any of those?
I'm going to be shooting the Ottawa one, but, that's really tame in comparison to what you get in the States.
There's a couple small ones starting here, sci-fi ones. Yeah. Very, very small. I don't know if they're going to happen anymore because one of the organizers last year skipped town in the middle of it and took all the money. So.
Oh my God!
Jeez, that's a good start.
So that was a great news story. But
did anybody get a picture of them?
Well, yeah, no, I don't do news anymore, man. But in St. John's, it's a pretty small town. Like in our catchment area, there's only 120,000 people, but we seem to have 120,000 photographers too. So.
Yeah, that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, and they flock to these things. So sometimes some of your friends are going, and you pop in and you see pictures from it, and there's like, it looks like a major election scrum or something with photographers and crews there just snapping pictures of people in plastic outfits.
Yeah.
I really miss the early days when I remember showing up to like I think it was 2007 New York Comic-Con, and I had a Sony Z1U, which is it's like a moderately professional video camera, or it was, and having a shotgun mic and things like that, and I was able to go literally wherever I wanted because I had a professional looking video camera. I followed like Entertainment Weekly into the back room and hung out with Joss Whedon for 20 minutes and then followed him onto stage, things like that. Like that, I would be arrested, tackled, and thrown out of the Comic-Con if I tried that. Even though I work for the work now for the 7th largest entertainment news site in the country, I still would get thrown out for that. But I mean, the other thing that, it's interesting that you have to be really careful with, and again, if you're a photographer at Comic-Con and you're not shooting it for news purposes, you really do actually need to get, you need to get paperwork from the people you're photographing, because otherwise you have to have some level of an agreement that the people, the cosplayers are actually not going to just grab your photos and use them their purpose themselves and potentially sell them. That's been a problem before, because then people still think that if you take your photo, they own 100% rights to it and can do whatever they want with it. But they have a little bit better of an argument when it's in a scenario like this. Even though they still don't have an argument. But so that's one of those things where I'm really surprised if he's not. It's my understanding he wasn't taking photos for a news operation, that he wasn't getting paperwork signed, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think if I was going that, there's two things I would keep in mind, and one thing goes back to the definitions of private and public places. Unless these people are on the street, you're in a private place. And once that happens, if I'm not working for a news organization, I want everybody signing a model release that I shoot.
Yeah.
That's going to be my salvation for it, because it's going to be an assignment. So
yeah.
So it's unfortunate because I wanted to put together a book for ages, because I've shot a dozen or so, whether it be San Diego, New York, and a couple other ones around the country, and I don't have any. I don't have any. Obviously, no. I've never had anyone sign anything. Of course, I don't even have names for most of the people, and so I can't really do anything. And I have all this amazing photography. It's up on my portfolio site, but it kind of blows that I can't put together a book or anything like that without at least it being somewhat edgy legally.
I think a book would qualify as editorial.
Yeah. No. If I sold the book, I think it gets into. I would make it an editorial book, I would say. I would make it definitely along those lines. But I've had discussions with enough other people who do the Comic-Con books and calendars and things like that professionally. Right. And it's fine. It's just you get that one person who causes a problem or has a problem with it. And the thing is, it should be known. I don't know about AfroComicCon. I've never covered that one. It's in California, so I wouldn't. But some of these conventions, people make they're art pieces. There's no other words for that. They're original art pieces taken from, they mix up different characters. So, the Iron Man meets Black Widow meets Batman or something like that, and there'll be this amazing costume that you see that they've spent thousands of dollars on and months working on. And so you kind of go, you're taking their, to some level, you're taking their work and their art from them when you take their photo. And, news purposes and things like that. I have a rule that if somebody wants one of my photos, I'm happy to send them over, because I work for, I work for comicbook.com, and it's good promotion for the site. But yeah.
The 7th largest entertainment site, you said?
Yes.
Well, you know what, Zach? You also work for the 1st largest podcasting site devoted to visual journalism roundtable discussions. So, that's a little feather in your cap right there, in case in case anybody ever challenges you. Just throw that out there. Be like, listen,
David, if that's true, then I think you need to start paying your guests here.
Non-profit.
I'm happy for the exposure.
The co-host has to get paid first, man.
As soon as I get paid, everybody else gets paid.
Okay. Then we need to talk about your business model here and making sure that you're
it's exposure, guys. It's exposure.
Okay.
That's your mistake. It's not a business, unfortunately. It's a hobby.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good referral when you apply for the New York Times job, okay?
There you go. Yeah, if anybody applies for the New York Times, just let them know you were on Around the Lens. That is a surefire way to get immediately passed over. So I'm just...
It's going on my resume.
There you go, man. That'll get you in. Trust me, that's your foot in the door right there. Once they see that, then they'll actually look at your resume. If they don't see that, no, not even get a look at. That's how it works usually, in my experience. But anyways, we're nearing the end of our show, and I want to throw a opportunity out to everybody to plug what you want to plug, and let people know what they should be looking at. So let's throw it out to our newcomer first, Greg. Where can either people find more about you, or what would you like to plug? Anybody you want you to check out?
Wow. I've been watching. A lot of my friends who are getting laid off from newspapers are going back to film and producing some amazing black and white street and documentary photography on their own. So I've been looking at what they're doing. That's I have no interest in going back to film whatsoever, but I do find it fascinating. So I've been following a guy named Colin Corno out of Winnipeg. He's doing some pretty interesting stuff. He was with the Brandon. I can't remember what the name of the brand the newspaper is, but we used to joke he was the last employed news photographer in Canada until he got laid off last summer. But he's doing some cool stuff. A guy named Shondor Feasley in Halifax, again, long-time commercial editorial photographer, doing amazing black and white stuff. I saw him set up a 4x5 on the beach yesterday shooting surfers with a 4x5 camera near Halifax. So, and I got a few friends in town doing stuff too. These days, I kind of like Instagram. Most all my new stuff is on Instagram, Greg.Locke, and that's about it for me. I get up in the morning, I shoot. I go to bed, I get up the next morning, I shoot. So, it's still a good business for me. I ran in, even one of my old agents in Toronto, he quit the business and moved to Nova Scotia and opened a distillery, and he can't believe I'm still in the business. So maybe that's not yet.
Nice. All right, let's keep it Canadian. Alex?
Yeah, so as usual, the nationalobserver.com, that's, nationalobserver.com, no the in front. That's the news organization I work the most for. It's a good upstart, not legacy news organization in the country. So give them a try. Subscribe if you're Canadian, or even if you're American. It's cheap for Americans. And for personally me, at Tetreault, TETREAULT AJ for Instagram and Twitter, and website altphotography.ca.
All right. Mark?
Start with a couple of websites. I am blogging not as often as I should be at the site you mentioned at the top of the hour, visualjournalism.info. I put that together for my students 11 years ago, I think now.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a bad
let me ask you, Mark, since you're on it, what do you think of the term visual journalism? Do you think that's I think that's a great term. I love it. That's why I, centered my show around it. But do you think that is an accurate term, or do you think it's not accurate? Do you think we should we group video and photojournalism underneath visual journalism, or do you think it should what do you think of that term as it is?
Yeah, so I thought long and hard before I named that website. It had a couple of different iterations on WordPress and Blogger before I registered the domain of visualjournalism.info. I run a visual journalism emphasis here at the University of Georgia. It's designed to encompass sort of the traditional still photojournalism, but also video. I think there's probably a smaller and smaller number of traditional photojournalists that are doing just the still work that are going to survive in the business at this point in time. You need to be able to modify the way that you tell stories to meet audience demands and market demands. And so video, photo, audio work falls into my purview here as well, along with some graphic design and a little bit of coding. I think it's a more accurate descriptor for what it is that I'm teaching. I think it's a more accurate descriptor for what I do. It's not just the traditional still photography. I mean, I grew up on Kodachrome 64 and Tri-X. That's not what I do anymore, though. I mean, the majority of what I produce every day is still stills. But I do video, I do some design work, sort of pulling all that stuff together. for my program, and that's, as I said, I launched visualjournalism.info, the early iterations, to sort of gather stuff from my students to be able to give them some places to start their own personal education on it. It's a little video, a little graphics, heavy on the photo side, a little bit of history stuff and things like that. So I think we could spend another hour debating photojournalism, video journalism, visual journalism, insert whatever word you want here, journalism at the end of the day. I think for me, the difference between visual journalism and most other forms of journalism is we eliminate the storyteller with photographs or video or audio, and it allows our audience to connect directly with people who are involved with the story. I never want anybody to know my name, but I want everybody to know the stories that I told. That's what I teach my students here.
Yes, selective fame, as I like to call it. You can have your stuff featured somewhere and be like, "That's me, that's me."
So the other website I'd like to toss people over to is mejphoto.com, mejphoto.com. That's my personal site. And I did the math on this 2 weeks ago, so I can be fairly accurate on this. If I do math in my head here, let's see, today's the 19th. So today was day 2,661 of producing a photo a day.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
This started as a 1-year project in 2010, and now it's 2018. And
oh my gosh,
momentum is a very powerful thing. I feel guilty if I don't make an image a day.
Oh my gosh,
post it online. Yeah. So that's today. I was wandering around on my lunch break, walked across the street to grab lunch, and I came back. And it's like, all right, so there's a photo for today, and shot 10 more, and I'll get edited down to just 1 or 2 pictures. But 2,661 days in a row.
Oh my gosh!
Today without missing a day.
That's crazy.
I beat my head against the wall going, what am I thinking? So, I'm on my 4th camera doing this. I've blown out 3 kids.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
All I gotta say is, whenever it is in the future, hopefully not for many, many years, you better make sure you have a timer with a camera capturing, after you pass and having automatically uploaded. So you keep that going one last time.
That's what scheduled posts are for.
Yeah. Well,
just really freak out everyone.
My students ask whether there'll be a coffin cam that'll automatically post to the website. And
I would hope
say
so.
Probably not. No, the plan is to be cremated and have my ashes spread on my favorite road in northern New York. So that's
on the road.
That's my dream.
Spread on the road.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, there's a 22-mile-long dirt road north of Old Forge, New York. That's my favorite road to drive in the world.
Wow.
And so all my ashes distributed.
All right. Well, there you go. Be there. Be there or be square. We'll make sure to photograph it if we're there.
Yeah.
That'll be an
That
event.
will be the last photo of the day right there. So.
Indeed. All right. Good, man. Yeah, I've been trying to keep it going. I've been actually sort of doing a photo a day since 2017. So we'll see how long I can keep it going for. Anyway, Zach, anything you want to throw out before we knock out tonight?
I forgot to kind of mention at the beginning what's been going on. So the person I photographed at Charlottesville, he was charged for assault against one of the white supremacists that later attacked him. Thankfully, he just got all of the charges finally completely dropped from him in town. If you remember the photo, you can go to my Twitter, ZD Roberts. So and as many people said, which is something I wouldn't have said, but to me, this is the importance of photojournalism. All of this would have happened without anybody knowing. This kid would probably be in jail, and there'd be a bunch of white supremacists that assaulted a kid in a parking garage during a protest, running scot-free. Like, this is the importance of photojournalism right there. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, this is going to bring us to the end of our show. I want to thank our guests so much for taking out time to be here tonight. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your all's time. You're always welcome back on. As always, we love to have you on. But anyways, for Around the Lens, episode 116, for Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. This has been, again, Around the Lens, episode 116, and we are out.